Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the migrant crisis with old couples, like the Franco-German one, airing their dirty laundry in public a little bit, with the French president chastising Angela Merkel in an interview with German newspaper Bild for going rogue, it seems, last summer when she unilaterally decided to open the doors to all of those refugees, who many of whom at the time were in a bottleneck in nearby Hungary. With us to talk about it from Frankfurt, political commentator Roland Tichy. We want to welcome back as well Alexis Poulain, the director of the news website Euractiv France, and Anne-Marie Le Granec, senior research fellow at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Amid the argument about refugees and burden sharing, let's take a pause to hear from what had to be the happiest man in the Netherlands on Wednesday, Dutch far-right leader Geert Wilders, who'd successfully campaigned in favor of a referendum that rejected a seemingly obscure to many trade deal with Ukraine, a first salvo since a new law allowing popular referendums for the Dutch.
The Dutch people might send a message to Brussels and the elite and all over Europe that enough is enough, and that we regain in this patriotic spring that has started in the last few months a part of our national sovereignty. And once again, I hope that later, both in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe, other countries will follow. Alexis
Poulain, to many people, a referendum in the Netherlands about a deal that's already been ratified over the Ukraine. Is this just a blip on the radar, or is this something important, especially, as Geert Wilders says, in the build-up to that Brexit referendum?
I think the message is clear, saying that, and he talked about this patriotic spring, there is hope for a lot of nationalists and populists in Europe that the borders will come back again and Schengen will die. And this is clearly a political move to that, and saying we will come back to this Europe of nation that we miss so much because of Brussels. So it's a message to the UK electorate, and it's a message to Brussels. There is a danger, and it's still there, that Europe will have to sort of evolve and change, and clearly the Franco-German summit could have been a moment, but it's not the case because the leaders are weak to decide about what will be the future of the Eurozone. We're talking about the parliament for the Eurozone. We're talking about more federalism, and nothing has come today because neither François Hollande nor Angela Merkel are in a position to propose courageous measure, or at least inventive measure to save Europe.
And Marie Glennick, will the referendum in the Netherlands at the end matter or not to solving issues like a common asylum policy and what to do about the refugees and migrants?
Certainly not. I wanted to say something first. I totally agree with the political symbolism of this referendum. And it is a terrible message to populists all over Europe, including in the UK. But also it's a terrible message to Putin, because the deal with Ukraine is supposed actually to strengthen Ukraine, which is a case in itself, a difficult country, let's put it this way, but to strengthen it, to tie it somewhat to Europe, to give it more independence regarding
it's
Russia.
Not just populists. Earlier, we had Guy Verhofstadt, the leader of the Liberals in the European Parliament, saying, well, this is a good thing. It sends a message that the EU needs to reform.
The EU needs to reform, but not when it is very weak and not when it is suffering from many crises at the same time. And what we are doing currently, what the heads of states and governments are doing currently, are really running from one crisis to the other, trying to solve one crisis, not even after the other, but all together. And there is some momentum here, which is quite staggering and frightening.
Roland Tichy?
Well, this sounds everything like a kind of a rat race. Who is even less powerful of our leaders? Who has even lost more backing by the people? I think in Europe, people love Europe, but they do not trust European policy, and I can understand that. There's still hope that their countries, that their nations are better run by their governments. And so this mistrust to Europe, because the legitimacy of Brussels and the European policy is diminishing. And as long as this is not re-established, we are going to this crisis. Anne-Marie Le Gouarnec in very good words described. And the euro crisis is not solved. The situation in Germany looks as good as it sounds because the economy still is strong, but economy in Germany is the overall beloved law. When growth rates go down, unemployment rises, the situation in Germany will worsen in an incredible accelerated momentum.
All right, and amid all of this, again, as we were saying, two other arguments that are taking place. One over that EU deal, and it's early days yet, to send migrants back to Turkey in exchange for pre-screened Syrian refugees. Now, there was a first batch on Monday, some 200, that went to Turkey. The coordinator for the implementation of the deal, talking up prospects earlier before the European Parliament, even though there have been no new transfers since Monday.
In the period from the 1st January to the 20th or the 21st of March, I should say, so that's before the drop in arrivals, 90 people lost their lives at sea. Since the 21st, no one has lost his life. Now, that is not a prediction for the future, but it's a logical consequence of that the numbers have gone down. And this was exactly one of the objectives of this agreement.
Well, this guy in suit at the parliament talking about numbers of people dying at sea, but the deal, you've seen the picture of the Frontex guard, one Frontex guy for one migrant in one of these ferry boats, talking about 80 people. So it's highly, again, a measure which is an image that they want to send to people saying, do not come here. Turkey so far has not granted any reason to believe that they will be nice with migrants or accept them. Or the camp we're talking about, one Greek minister referred to the German war camp. And the Red Cross International criticized the deal, saying that Turkey is not a safe harbor for migrants. And so far, this deal is wrong in many, many reasons. For human rights first, for the money that is putting in the Frontex out of protecting people before they come here in Turkey. But this is purely, I think, a political move to say, don't come here, we'll send you back. But Europe is losing its soul here.
I wanted to say something on this point. I mean, it's a quick fix. It's trying to dry up. Yeah. It's trying to dry up the Aegean Sea route. Yeah. And when you dry up the Aegean Sea route, there is another route which is going to pop up. And the other route is where? It's between Libya and
so
Italy.
You'll see more boats coming.
And exactly, you see already more people coming to Italy. The problem with Libya now, it's got a government. Maybe that's gonna go on, hopefully, but we have Daesh, and Daesh may profit from this trafficking. So we have a much more dangerous situation, potentially. What the EU has been doing so far for over the past 10 to 15 years has been outsourcing the control of its borders and the refugee problems to countries like Libya, Gaddafi, like Turkey, with Erdogan,
it's even worse.
Countries
they
which
have a deal with Eritrea, which is a terrible dictatorship, leading to deaths of people in the streets of the capital about 2 days ago. So this is wrong. The European policy is killing people. It's not protecting them from dying at sea. It's a wrong policy dealing with dictators or
delivering them in the hand of authoritarian leaders.
And bad regimes, not the one that we can trust.
All right, misgivings over sending back refugees and migrants to Turkey, which in turn has been sending some back, according to Amnesty International, to Syria at the rate of 100 a day, roughly. Members of the European Parliament divided over the deal, and some pointedly angry over the conditions under which refugees are also being kept forcefully in camps in Greece.
Onwards on detention in Greece, please elaborate on the fact that these camps used to be open camps are now detention centers where actually there are food shortages. Food shortages and children, babies not getting the baby milk they actually need. This is in the European Union. This is people detained with not enough food. Come on.
All right, the coordinator answering that some NGOs are unable to go in the camps because their laws forbid them, their statutes from entering closed camps. One reaction on Facebook, Larry, asylum seekers should be handled according to accepted international law, and economic migrants should be returned to their home countries. Roland Tichy, where you are in Germany, what's the reaction to these closed camps in Greece?
Well, I heard this word, outsourcing frontier control, and this is exactly what Angela Merkel tries to do. She always explained that Germany cannot control its frontiers, but Greek or Italy should, can Turkey, can Libya. So this is the ironic move, and the Turkish deal is trying to get quick wins. But those quick wins cost money and cost moral and attitude towards people. So I do not like this deal, and everybody, even calling it a deal, knows that this is not how policy should work. And so this is the problem of Angela Merkel. Now she stands without any solution. She promised the people in Germany that she will
So
get
would no deal be better than the deal
Europe,
that's there between the EU and Turkey?
At least this deal is no good deal. She wanted to have to present a European solution, and she wanted a solution to save the European frontiers, and nothing helped yet. There's no solution, no safe frontier.
Actually, a real solution or real solutions would be European solutions. I mean, she has been right there. And it is about relocation, and it's about border control altogether. But there is no country in the European Union that wants to follow Germany on that point. So the only thing, I mean, we are contributing actually to the EU-Turkey deal. We are criticizing it, but we are contributing to that because we are unable to act together.
All right, but on that point, there's public opinion, and public opinion is in favor of keeping him out. And furthermore, we know that the European Commission this week has been working on a reform of asylum policy. One option is a sort of enhanced system that we have now, where it would still be a sort of a unified quota that may be dispatched. Another would be to have it country by country. 55% in our F24 debate poll on Twitter are in favor of asylum policy being country by country. 45% want a unified approach with quotas. More people in favor of it being a national issue rather than an EU issue.
Yeah, because if you look at the European level, the nationalist propaganda is strong on every European country. So, of course, people tend to think beyond borders. But there is no solution at country level. If you look at all the problems on the table, and the refugees are one, but
it's the will of the people.
Well, no, it's polls and it's propaganda turning public opinions towards a more nationalistic approach. But I think because the leaders are weak and they don't tackle this issue, they let this populism and this nationalism by calculation, political calculation, or because they can't go against it, or because it's good for them. This is where we stand now. It's a moment where we lack leadership and we lack people with strong ideas and courage.
Let me just read to you Roland Tichy on Twitter on the hashtag F24 debate. This comment: the EU shouldn't have to handle the migrant crisis. It's a national issue. What do you say to that?
It is not a national issue, as now the question of border control moves to Italy. It moves out of Greece and moves to Italy. And what is Italy doing? Until now, Italy is pretty open. So we must, in Europe, work together. But there is no vision, as I said before, and this is the couple divided.
If there's one big issue, it's the war in Syria and Iraq and this country, and now Libya being destabilized. What we're doing, there's some NATO strikes, but there's no strong international intervention there. It's sort of waiting for the big crash to happen. But it's not a national issue. It's an international issue. The HCR should be there. The US should be in there as well, because it's thanks to their policy in Iraq that we're there now. It's not a European issue. It's not even a national issue. It's an international issue.
And Marie-Grenec, listening to what Alexis Poulain says, remember the war in Bosnia? It was when the Americans intervened that it came to an end.
Yes, but so far the Americans are not ready to intervene. I wanted to, I mean,
of course not. It's electoral year, so they will do nothing until next year.
To go in the same direction, I mean, the crisis was a crisis in the making already a few years ago. It was obvious that the numbers of refugees were increasing. It was obvious that the Syrians wouldn't stay in the refugee camps in Jordan and Syria and Lebanon, that they would move on as soon as the situation was going to deteriorate. And what was done? Nothing in Europe, I mean, in spite of the fact that we are very, very close to these areas. We don't have any European border controls. Our borders are really like sieves, and we have been trying to find other, not solutions, but outsourcing, as I said before. So this is one of our problems. We are completely lacking foresight. And Roland Tichy was underlining the fact that, I mean, there is no European leadership, but and there is no legitimacy at the European level, but within our countries. I mean, look at the picture. I am saying that Angela Merkel is a bit stronger than others, but look at the various countries. I mean, they are in a terrible kind of situation. We have a very weak president. We have a very weak prime minister in the UK who is desperately fighting for something he made up, that is the referendum. I mean, look at various countries. We have no leadership. So the European Union is a reflection of what's happening at the national level, which is pretty thin.
All right, policing the borders of Europe and making sure that there is some kind of closure when it comes to Syria and Iraq, that's more the remit of NATO than of the EU. So what do you do if defense?
No, I mean, border guards, I'm sorry, are not exactly an army. I mean, a border guard normally is something which a state has, and the European Union should be should have a European national border guard. What do we have instead of that? We have Frontex.
Roland Tichy, do you see movement on this?
No. Europe, remember, was so proud being what we called a soft power against the hard power as the United States. Now, the soft power tries to source out the border control to the United States again. Yeah. This is nitty-gritty in arguments. I mean, we have to handle the situation on our own. The question is, what me really makes very sorrow is Europe making those nation leaders stronger, or does it make them weaker? And in the moment they are losing power as soon as they go to Brussels, because in Brussels they cannot act, but they can just discuss and do not come to any solution.
No, that's two different things.
And so many people think, let's do the things on our own, not because we do not like Europe, but Europe does not do it.
No, our governments are very weak at the national level. I mean, look at what's going on in Paris, look at what is going on in London, and even in Italy, it doesn't look very good either. I mean, it's not going to Brussels that weaken the leaders, but it's really, I mean, the leaders themselves, the political party are falling apart.
Yes, it's a moment where people that have been elected in the past have no more legitimacy in most of European countries, or where coalitions are weak because they can't govern. Now you talk about the European Commission of Juncker is trying to bring these people around the table, but they won't discuss. And Europe at 28, it's impossible to get a common ground on any policy. That's one of the problems. So talking about different speed Europe is one of the solutions, but nobody wants to put it on the table because of the Brexit and this and that. But the problem is that the Europe that used to work sort of 20 years ago is dead, or it can't work anymore, just like lots of democratic system where we're asking questions. But who's thinking ahead? Who's thinking back, saying Euromed was a good idea? Actually, it never happened. But we're in this, disgraceful situation because we think that the Mediterranean is a border. It's a way to discuss with the other side. We are very close to the other side. It's just saying that people can come on boats in days, and this lack of vision is now being terribly dangerous for all of the people of Europe.
Let's hope that we'll have more clarity, as you said, after that June 23rd referendum,
Yes.
Or even before in the UK for the Brexit. I want to thank you, Alexis Poulain. I want to thank Ron Tichy in Frankfurt. And I want to thank Anne-Marie Le Glois next. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment's next. Government. We won't talk about Ireland's problems today, James.
Let's leave it out of it. Let's focus more on the Franco-German engine, or at least the engine that was, which is increasingly fractured. An engine that was meant to drive political integration, drive a common vision. François Hollande perhaps attempting to repair the image of Franco-German relations in an interview he gave yesterday to Bild, the Bild newspaper, ahead of his meeting with
I noticed this, by the way, that they did a French translation of it.
That's right. And indeed, some commenting on that, such as this Twitter user, Pierre Briançon, saying a nice touch by Bild to publish a French version of the Hollande interview. Not sure a French paper would do the same with Merkel, although we have seen Le Monde and other media publish big interviews, etc., in English. Others pointing out that actually it was relegated to the bottom left of the front page. So even if they had a French version, it was sort of pushed to one side by other matters in the German media. There was an English version as well, published in Business Insider. Europe cannot wait for others to solve our problem for us. That was, I suppose, one of the central messages that François Hollande was trying to get through in this interview, a message in favour of Europe. Hollande tells Bild that the EU takes a long time but now has the solutions to the banking crisis, sovereign debt crisis, the refugee crisis, the anti-terror fight. So it was a sort of a plea in favour of Europe's role for these transnational
He fits a lot into 140 characters.
He does indeed. Yeah. Well, it was quite an extensive interview. This is a screen grab of the German version.
Go back to that picture 1 second.
Here?
The one that you just had a minute ago. Yeah, that one. Because it caught our eye in the newsroom here. Lots of the tapestry there, figures cropped in such a way that you got more tapestry than you do.
Perhaps a metaphor for perhaps a lack of commonality. In any case, the EU decides to slow down was what was something that was picked up on by Bild's editors, as if he had no responsibility for that, says Paolo Vacca, on member states are to blame. So, in other words, he's pleading far more of the EU, but in fact, perhaps it's at the member state level that it has all been slowed down. Everything is fine in France. It's Europe that is taking too long to decide. A degree of cynicism regarding that being expressed by Anna Di Mario. Hallucinant, she says. Crazy. What is he on about? Now, French media picked up on something much more close to home, which is the fact that after the terror attacks of last November, François Hollande proposed stripping dual nationality, stripping French citizenship of dual nationals if they were implicated in terror charges. And here he had to bow down on that because there was a lack of consensus in the French Parliament and they couldn't push it through. And here he says to Bild, it's not in stripping one's nationality that you actually succeed in combating terrorism, which sounds like he's just revising his whole policy.
Alexis Poulain, what does that say?
Well, let's say that we lost about 3 months of debate. We all knew it in the first place. Some people just went into defending this idea that there was a solution. Everybody knew it was no solution, at least, and it was pure political wind. No, saying that now is to a German audience, I don't know, it's a question mark.
I think it was more for French.
Flip-flop.
Right. It was probably more intended for the domestic market,
But yeah,
if you like.
saying it is very, saying I've been wrong all the way.
Right.
All right, well, intended for the domestic market, nonetheless, making it on France 24. Many thanks for that, James Creedon.
Thanks, François.
I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.